Give this thing a little rinse off. Oh yeah, this is rinse this thing off everywhere. Inside and out. What's going on, guys? Today I just got some good news and some bad news. I just found out this little, what I thought was a 50cc four-wheeler. Let me step back just a little bit. It's actually a 125cc four-wheeler. I went on the back frame there and it actually has 125cc stamped on the back. So I was going through it trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And as you can see here, this is not oil. I pulled the oil plug and all water in there just came pouring out. I should have caught that on video, but I missed it. Looks like this thing was just submerged. That air filter is a little rusty up there, and there we're getting some milkiness getting ready to come out of the oil, so it is definitely seeing better days. I looked up in there and it looks a little bit like I can see some rust in there, and I can't get the motor to turn over by hand, so we're going to go ahead and drain all the fluids out and see what we can do about saving this thing. Try to capture this on video. Yeah, that doesn't look too good. Yeah, that's not oil. Still water. Alright, so earlier this thing was locked up and I just kicked it into reverse and still a little stiff, but if I can give it a little bit of a kick. There it goes. There, the motor's moving, or transmission's moving at least. It was completely locked, so I think that was the motor that was actually locked up. So I'm going to give it a couple of turns. I put in some PB Blaster catalyst. It's going to break that motor free and any of the junk that's in there. I'm going to try to blast it out, clean this thing all out, throw some oil in it. I got a spark plug. Sorry for the light in here, but best is what I can do is with this little flashlight here. Well, she's moving, she's turning over, so I got a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I was hoping that this thing wasn't just blown up. So that's what it is looking like in the oil pan, so we really need to clean this thing out. I'm going to get some 1540, which is what this thing calls for. We're going to go ahead and start pumping some 1540 in there, turn the crankcase over a few times, dump it all out, and do it again, and maybe we can get this thing saved. Give this thing a little rinse off. Oh yeah, this is rinse this thing off everywhere. Inside and out. So I've got the whole body torn off of this thing, gas tank, handlebars. I'm disassembling the electronics and everything. I'm going to go ahead and pull the motor completely out of the chassis. There are plenty of videos going over building this motor, so I'm not going to go too in-depth, but I'm going to pull this apart and go ahead and pull my head and top of my motor apart. Oh, what's going on, guys? Another day, another dollar. We're back in the project shed. I really want to do a redo. I want to tear all this out, take all this stuff out of here, build some shelves, get rid of this desk, or maybe modify it and move it, make this more of a usable space. But we got the Sportsman running. I still have to figure out the lights on this thing. It is having a little bit of issue. I think it's to do with this power switch, but we're still working on this thing, this little project. I've got it completely apart. I haven't seen really any other issues. I'm going to go over the frame, make sure none of the welds are busted on it, because there were some big kids riding this thing. But I'm over here in the corner. I've got the motor set up. We are ready for a tear down. There was water all inside of this motor, inside the transmission and everything. So we're gonna go ahead and pull the head off, take this cover off right here, and we're gonna see what it looks like, see if it's salvageable. Let me get all the screws off this thing, see what this looks like. Oh my goodness. That does not look good. Ugh. What is that? This thing is probably trashed. Well, with this motor torn down, we can see right where the problems is. I think the main reason why this thing it doesn't want to move, you can see this chain is totally crusted. It is totally shot. And if we move up here to the timing chain in here, you can see this thing is all crusted over. You can see the water line right here where this thing was just sunk. Still gonna try to save it because it's still kind of oily. I might be able to do something with it, but I don't know about these chains. We'll probably definitely have to get new chains. So the timing chain isn't quite as bad. It still needs to be replaced, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. I'm gonna go ahead and finish taking this bolt off and slide this head off. Yeah, I would say that's a blown head gasket. The whole top of it is missing. Ooh, that looks wonderful. The valve is stuck open. Wow, I seriously have never seen a motor look so yummy. That's sick. What is in there? It's like pudding. Alright, so I've got the head off and I've got it all cleaned out in here. Get a little bit of a better look in here. It is definitely looking a little bit crusty in there. And that piston is locked right inside of this cylinder. I'm going to try to break it free and go ahead and pull this cylinder right off. Alright, so we've had this Coolster motor apart for a little while. I just got in a bunch of parts. This is a new starting chain in here, new air filter, starter chain. Last but not least, we got brand new cylinder jug, and I've already checked it out. It actually has a nicer cylinder, or not cylinder, but a nicer piston than the one I already ordered. So I'll have a spare piston, but the one that's in there actually looks a lot better. I'm gonna go ahead and I need to get my puller. I'm gonna pull this thing off. We're gonna replace this chain, put the tensioners back in, and start reassembling this thing. Also going to be tearing this head down. It isn't too bad on the other side, but this side is actually pretty crusty. This is the bottom side. It was sitting like this. So the top side is actually pretty clean, but that one's pretty gnarly. So we're going to tear this down, and the cylinder actually came with new valve guide seals, so I'm going to put those in while we got it all apart. You can kind of see a wear mark, see that shiny spot on the inner cam lobe. And then this outer cam lobe, you can see it has a nice little rusty patch. And I'm polishing that out with some high grit sandpaper. But it just looks like this thing just didn't have very good meshing when it was from the factory. This thing looks like it's just rubbing a groove right in this thing. I mean, it might be normal, but I don't know. Looks a little bit rough to me. Alright, after a ton of polishing, that's as good as it's gonna get. I had to do a little bit of grinding and then sanding a little bit more, but I'm just gonna send it. Well, looks can be deceiving. This is the intake valve, and from the outside it looked much better condition than the exhaust valve, which I have here. But in the end, the exhaust valve is actually in much better condition than that was. But then the intake valve was. Take a look. That's the intake. There's the exhaust. You can see the blackening near the exhaust. And that is just full of crud. It's a good thing I managed to get that thing off. It was actually stuck, and that's why it was stuck. Alright, I finally got that thing off of there. I had to go rent a puller at Advance to be able to get that thing off of there. But this is what I was having to deal with. I was trying to save this chain. This is the starter chain, and I ended up replacing it because you can see this spot is just rock solid. No matter what I did, it wouldn't break free enough for me to feel comfortable putting it back in there. So I went ahead and put the new chain in there, and we're ready to go with that. I'm going to start reassembling, and we'll put this new piston back in. Alright, so I'm back to rotating assembly, doing pretty well. I'm still going to take this back casing off just to clean it out once I'm done reassembling everything. There's a lot of junk that fell down through there. So I'm going to clean it all out. I've already washed it and flushed it down. So we're going to start with the piston, start putting new gaskets on. I already put the new starting chain on, and this timing chain is actually in pretty good condition. Got the tensioner lined up. It was off track a little bit, But now I'm going to go ahead and start reassembly. There is some junk still on the crankshaft, but I think with a little bit of running and some flushes, it's going to clean on out. Well, that looks great. I've got the other side of the motor casing off, and there's some yummy stuff all in there. I'm just going to try to clean as much of this out as I can. Hopefully this thing will still function. Alright, well, that cleaned up nicely. I ended up having to replace one of the clips. One of these things had fallen off and was laying inside of here. It was actually right in this little corner right here. I found it just sitting there. And I found half of the clip sitting in the bottom of this side. So we got this thing all cleaned out. I cleaned off the dipstick really nicely. I did not take this off because I don't have the clutch tool to take this off. We went ahead and installed the cylinder jug. The new piston is in there. Did a little bit of oil, did the rings and everything properly. I'm not going to take this apart any further, simply because I'm just going to do a couple of flushes on it, and hopefully everything will come back together. I'm pretty sure this whole assembly had very low miles on it. So we're hoping that with a little bit of flushing out and some cleaning, some fresh oil, I'm not even gonna run it for the first couple of times, just gonna flush some oil through the entire system, drain it out, and then redo it a couple of times until we get it ready to run. Then we're gonna try to run it, flush it out again until it starts to look clean. So I've got this whole gasket set. Actually, now that I've ordered everything, I ended up with 3 head gaskets. But I've got this whole gasket set. This is for 110, but it's the same casing, same gear casing for this thing. They just put different cylinder jugs on the top. But I'm gonna find the one that I need for this thing. I'm gonna put all this back together. Alright, I'm pretty sure I was able to save this head. I went ahead and did a valve lapping in here and cleaned this thing all up. This looks considerably better than what it was before, but around these valves, it was very corroded. And the intake valve was the best looking one, but inside of it was actually holding crud and water. So inside of here was actually stuck. This valve was totally stuck and corroded all up inside of behind of here. But the bottom looked really good, and then it looked good inside of here. It was the best looking one. But inside of this head, it had sucked water into that intake and was sitting right on top of that intake valve, which is very, very bad. But it was just in time, I think, to be able to save this head. If not, I can get this whole head redone for like 40, 50 bucks, or I can get a new one for 50 bucks. So either way, $50 and you just replace this. But hopefully a little bit of work that I put into it saved it. And I'm going to go ahead and slap it back on here. I got my new piston in there, timing chain hanging there, ready to go. We're going to start putting this back together. Alright, we have finished most of the reassembly of this motor. You can see she's got the timing mark lined up here, and I've got it here. Let me pull that plug out. Yeah, it looks quite crudded up, but there's the little marking right there and the T right next to it for top dead center. So now this thing is all set on top dead center, and it says right on my timing mark, I can go ahead and set my valve adjustment. And I think that's 0.003, I believe it is, for these, 003 to 005. And I'm going to go ahead and do that and then slap all these covers back on. I still need to cover or clean these covers out for these valves. But that'll be the last process, and then we can start bolting this back into this chassis I have here. Oh, there's my coffee. Got the Polaris running good. We need to get this thing on the road. Alright, so I've slipped that motor back in there, plugged the 2 wires up here. These wiring harness, really the only 2 things to plug in are up there, and hooking up the starter wires. So I got that all set up in there. That's ready to be tested, but we need some fuel. So we're moving over to the carburetor. And from the smells of things, this is not going to be in good condition. So let's go ahead and pop this intake off. Ooh, yummy. That is gross. Bam, it's another day. We've got our fueling system completely rebuilt. We actually went ahead and replaced these lines for this breather system. This pulls air out of the crankcase, I believe. And went ahead and put a new air filter on here. This is an upgraded air filter compared to, this is the stock air filter right here. Quite an upgrade. You can see it's pretty much twice the size. This is actually a 35 millimeter, but it clamped down pretty good. I think this carburetor is a 32 millimeter intake. I ordered a new carburetor just in case this doesn't work out. But we are all set up to test this fueling system out. I'm not one for putting on shady fueling and lines and all that. I like to replace all the lines just because I don't want to send any trash in this build. So I've got this fueling system, this carburetor and everything cleaned out as best I can. I've cleaned this, pushing some carburetor cleaner right down through this inlet until it ran out clean. I soaked it for several days in Dawn dish detergent and water before I even did all that, flushing it multiple times just because I can't get it apart. I started to drill it out, but it did not work out because it just kind of got offset right there. And this one, it wouldn't let go, and I was almost there. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to order a carburetor, and I'm going to try to clean this one while it's still together, because the way it got offset like that, it was just destroying the housing. So we're going to go ahead and try to install this onto the motor. So we got this all cleaned off. Just got to install the intake and put this right on there. I've also got to clean out the fuel tank, and this thing will be ready to get started. I also have a battery in the house. Alright, so we've got fuel in a freshly cleaned fuel tank. I use an old trick my dad taught me. You fill it with rocks, a little bit of gravel, and just shake it and shake it and shake it until everything kind of shakes loose on the inside. It breaks all the stuff off the surface, all the rust and everything. So broke all that stuff free, rinsed it multiple times, run some fresh gas through it. There's our fuel filter. It's nice and clear fuel through there. It looks kind of yellow on this camera, but it's actually crystal clear. I was looking at it. So the air filter is a bit bigger than the stock one was, and so the only final step we have now to go ahead and do a test. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this battery on there. Hopefully this is all not all for nothing. I'm going to leave the whole body and everything off of it so I can do some testing, make sure this wiring harness is still good. Alright, so we've got the new battery in here. I went ahead and put the shifter on here, and out of necessity I went ahead and brought the whole body over there because the previous owner glued the ignition switch into the body, so I couldn't even take it off. So I went ahead and hooked the ignition switch and the neutral and reverse lights up, and nothing was coming on the neutral reverse lights. I went ahead and hooked the gear shifter up and shifted it into neutral and reverse, checking the lights. Now nothing was happening until I started working the ignition switch with the key back and forth, and I'm starting to get a little bit more action out of the lights, but I'm not getting consistent light, so I believe that the ignition switch is faulty. So I'm gonna have to work on that, get that all worked out, and then we'll be able to try to get this motor turned over. You can see the lights kind of just flash. I know I got it in neutral, but I'm hoping that working this switch a little bit might be able to get this thing. See, I'm actually getting a lot more response. It's actually staying on a lot more. So I'm going to keep working this switch, and I've got some terminal cleaner I'm going to spray and try to clean this ignition switch up. Alright, so unfortunately we're going to have to end this build where we are now. I'm waiting for a few parts. I ordered a new ignition switch, which is where the key turns on and off, because I was having issues with it before. I also ordered a new power switch for the handlebars and a new switch and brake handle that comes on. That's the switch that activates when you pull the brake handle. It allows you to start the four-wheeler. So this thing has been sitting outside for over a year, full of water. I'm pretty sure most of that stuff is bad. I also ordered a new spark plug and entire ignition system, including this little thing here. I think this is like the ignition box or something. Ordered that new. I'm also doing a little bit of research to figure out about the security system. I think this might have a security system on the back, but right now it's doing nothing when I hit the power. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of troubleshooting, a little bit of research, and part 2 I'll be able to do a starting video. So please subscribe, hit me up in the comments if you don't like what I'm doing, or if I'm doing something wrong, let me know. Till next time, deuces.